Okay, it is a little after 10 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started on our first Rawls Responds webinar. Today, our topic is a small business primer on the CARES Act. I would say, number one, thank you for listening in. Two, understand that we're new at this. At least three of us have rapidly had to adapt in the past few weeks as faculty members at Texas Tech. And Dr. Buschbom and I have been recording lectures, but still collectively, we're all new at this. Additionally, this is a rapidly changing topic. I mean, as we speak, literally, there is new guidance, new forms. We'll probably have untold emails in our inbox between the time this webinar goes and until it's over. Also, I would mention that there's going to be a possibility for future series or episodes, versions of Rawls Responds, particularly on response to the coronavirus and in the small business community. There is a poll function on your Zoom application. All we're doing is just trying to collect who's attending, who's watching, where are you at, et cetera, and we'll use that as we go forward. This recording will be posted. We're not exactly sure of the outlets yet, but I imagine the Rawls College of Business and their YouTube account will host it. If not, we will send out social media communications about where it's at if people either A, didn't get to make it, or B, want to follow up of the recording. And so just in case this is your first participation in a Zoom webinar, how a webinar works is we cannot see your video or hear your audio on your end. And so do not be concerned if there's noise in the background as a participant. We won't hear it. We also can't see you. And so we couldn't see things like your really cool Tiger King Zoom background either. So it's just us, but we have built in, or Zoom builds in, a Q&A function where you can ask questions. You can type those. We will try our best to monitor those. Not exactly, we're all new at this, and potentially answer them at the end. Or if we don't get to them, we'll give you some resources at the end about how we can get those answered. And so at this point, I'm going to shift it over to a view of some slides that we have put together for you. And so I'm going to try and maximize them so they show up in the best light possible for everybody. And so there we go. Let me go to the beginning here. My apologies. We're calling this series Rawls Responds. Just why we came up with it. I know that Mike and I were on a call a couple weeks ago with Mayor Dan Pope. And he really put out a call and a request to the Rawls College of Business and our faculty to assist small businesses during this time. And so that's part of it. A couple of days ago, Stephen and I had a call with some of our younger Rio alumni from our real estate program, and they were very supportive in ways to help. And I know they helped spread the word about this program. Also, this is done with current students in mind. Dr. Buschbom and I are still developing content. Unfortunately, a lot of the student organization events have been canceled. And so we do have students in mind as we're discussing this. And then officially the idea itself was Dr. Buschbom's, and we've all worked together to implement it. So with that, that's enough of me talking. As background, my name is Jared Harrell. I'm an assistant professor of practice focused on real estate. And I was and still am a practicing real estate attorney. Dr. Buschbom, would you mind introducing yourself and giving a quick background?
Sure. I'm Stephen Buschbom. I joined the Rawls faculty about 3 years ago. I worked for 6 years it was ING, it's now Voya Investment Management in commercial real estate, whole loan lending, and commercial mortgage-backed security trading. So that's my brief background.
Excellent. And we also have with us Mike Mauldin, one of our newest faculty members at Rawls. So Mike, give us a little relevant background.
Yes. My name is Mike Mauldin. I joined the Rawls faculty November 1st, very recent, after over a 41-year successful career in banking. And I am running the Excellence in Banking program, and we're so excited to get it off the ground. But there's a lot more I could talk about, but I really want to get to the content.
Outstanding. And finally, I get the joy of merging a couple worlds of mine and having a good friend and also a business partner, Shawn Ferguson of Crowley Kwik Cars. So, Shawn, will you give us a brief intro and feel free to go a little longer so everybody is a little more familiar with what you do on a day to day.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Shawn Ferguson, and I own 3 Kwik Cars, small business auto repair centers in Fort Worth, Hurst, and Arlington, Texas. So, this program is, it's a great program. And so I want to share with everybody at some point throughout this call, just kind of how it affects small business owners and how this is, a lifeline for a lot of people. I've got 3 Kwik Cars, like I said, and then I operate all those on a daily basis. And so there's a lot going into this with trying to keep all the employees employed this is it's extremely fluid as to how we're operating on a day-to-day basis, because everything is changing from, the media and how everybody's staying home, everybody's working from home. There's a shutdown in place. And so this is, even though we have, these funds and these opportunities and these loans, these are going to be great opportunities for us, to
So, Shawn,
have my doors open. Yeah, what's up?
We've talked pretty much constantly. In full disclosure, Shawn and I are business partners. I'm involved in the ownership group of the Crowley Kwik Car location. So on a percentage basis, one of the metrics we use is car counts, which I think is pretty easy for everybody to understand. What would you estimate the reduction you've seen in car counts over the period since this really started?
About 40 to 50% reduction.
Damn.
It started slow, but as of, the end of last week is when we really started seeing it hit hard. And so that number is trending down. It's a real issue now.
And you've applied for 2 of these programs, or have at least started the application process, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And so there's the 2 that we did. I did them about 2 days ago. And it's simple, but there's still, even the big one, it changed the application last night at midnight.
Yeah.
So I have to refill it out today and go submit it. So all this stuff is changing on an hourly basis.
Well, and I just wanted to mention that for our listeners and people participating that you've been through the process with pretty much the most relevant experience. You would be one of the 1% experts in the entire world on this process, right? As of today, as far as people who've done it. So thanks for jumping in. Sure. And so what we're going to cover, kind of some very basic topics that we're going to try and give some advice on and some relevant information on, are number 1, the Small Business Administration and how these programs are in it. 2, we'll talk about how the CARES Act, which was just recently passed by Congress. And so these 2 programs that we're going to visit about, administered by the SBA, were implemented or at least put into place through that act. And those 2 specific provisions that we want to touch on are the EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and then the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. And so as a very beginning block, Mike, could you tell us in a nutshell, what is the SBA?
Sure. The SBA is the U.S. Small Business Administration. It was actually formed in 1953, and it is an independent agency of the U.S. government. Basically, it was formed to aid, counsel, assist, and protect the interests of the small businesses in our country. And they do this by offering loan guarantees, government contracts, financial counseling, and other forms of assistance to qualified American small businesses. And so that's why they put these programs under the SBA. But we need to make sure everyone understands that the EIDL, you apply to the SBA, the PPP, you apply through the bank. So that'll be a theme through this whole series.
And so Mike and Stephen, historically, SBA loans existed before the CARES Act. So when people thought, and SBA loans, were those loans that, are they made by the SBA, or were they made in connection with the local bank?
Both. The program can be guaranteed loans, and then they can be direct. And there's several other areas in which the SBA can function, but primarily it's a partnership with the American lenders that the SBA most likes to function. However, in this case, and that's what's happening here, that they've transferred their authority on the PP&P to the banks so that they can get this out quickly. But on the EIDL, something that Shawn's going to talk about, that's a direct loan application to the Small Business Administration.
These are really, I mean, we needed the channels, the pipes to get cash flowing to businesses and individuals. And the SBA is, a very effective immediate channel available to us to, help build this, I guess, to put metaphorical terms, build a bridge to the other side of this crisis.
Jared, let me just mention too, before we go on, that people may be asking, why is it taking so long to get out? But if you really consider how fast all this legislation has occurred, but the programs are being run by the SBA, but they're being interpreted and handed down by the U.S. Treasury. So that's creating some confusion, and many of the banks have not received their information till 7 o'clock last night or later. So please be patient with all those who are trying to deliver these programs, because they are working as hard as they can to get them to you.
So Shawn, you've applied for an SBA loan previously before these programs. And so could you give just a kind of a recap and your takeaway from that original SBA loan process?
Yeah, that first loan we did about 2.5 years ago, I mean, it was an extremely arduous, very long process. They told us it would take about 120 days to close. I didn't believe that at first, but it took every bit of 4 to 5 to 6 months to get it closed. And I mean, it is a mountain of documents. It's a good program, especially for first-time owners, but it is arduous. And I did it with Jared as well, and we were constantly every night just filling out documents, resubmitting documents.
It's amazing we're still friends today. That was first time we got to know each other.
And so, when I heard that these loans were going to be going through the SBA, my first instinct was that I'm going to have to just give them more mountains and mountains of documents, and this is going to take weeks and weeks, if not months. But to see how they facilitated this, it is very streamlined. And I'm not kidding. When I filled out the PP&P application, I called my lender after I got done with page 2 and was like, where's the rest of it? I think you left off 100 pages of stuff I need to fill out. And he's like, that's all I got. This is very simple. They are really trying to get money to business owners as quickly as possible. It's kind of like, let's get people approved. Let's get the paperwork in and figure it out later after, because your first payments is deferred for 6 months. And so they've got time to get all that figured out. They're just trying to get money out there to get people rehired. So you can have a full staff, people can pay their rent, pay their bills. Yeah,
I mean, in an economic term, there's a real first mover advantage on this. And that was one of the reasons we wanted to do this seminar today, is to give some practical advice on both the EIDL and the PPP. And so what we intend to do, our audience here are small business owners, giving you some resources with that application process, to finance professionals, if you're working with a banker or just want some background on these programs. I mean, I think this is a very basic intro. Also, I'm a real estate guy. Dr. Buschbom's a real estate guy. We've got real estate professionals in mind, and even those in the advisory context, brokers, et cetera. I mean, this is valuable information you can give to your clients. What a great way to add value. And we'll probably have some more kind of side notes on real estate, but as a preliminary matter, anything you want to touch on there, Stephen, about how these programs apply to real estate?
Oh, sure. I guess from, a cash management standpoint, I would say some just good advice to maybe pass on to employees is this money does get dispersed and is intended to kind of help our economy out. Make sure that your employees know about mortgage relief programs that are out there. Specifically, a great resource to go to is the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau's website on coronavirus mortgage relief. And I'll post some links to the chat room here to provide help where you can just, I just actually did this before our call. You can go to the Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac website, put in your street address and some basic information and see, if one of these agencies purchased your mortgage and allows you to be eligible for some of these foreclosure or payment relief measures that have been put in place through the CARES Act.
And that's a great resource, and we'll make sure and extract that from the chat and get it in some relevant places for people to look at. I know the first thing I'm going to do when we get off this call is probably check it out. And then finally, college students. I mean, that's for three of us, that's our audience and what we do on a daily basis. So we do want to give you some relevant information. And I think this would be good information even for those of you entering the job market. You want to find a way to add value immediately to an employer. Know about these programs, or at least be able to discuss them and volunteer up some advice to maybe help them get it figured out. So I do think it can be relevant even if you're not living it day to day. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to utilize QR codes. And if you've never used a QR code before, really all you have to do with smartphones these days is just open your camera app and scan this code, and it will bring up the web link on your phone. At least that's how it works on my iPhone. Dr. Buschbom, is that how it works on an Android as well?
It does.
Okay.
I just bring up my camera, hold it up, it recognizes the QR code, you click the link, and you're good to go.
And so for those of you that are members of our student organization at Rawls, the real estate organization, this is actually going to count as a meeting. Most of our events have been canceled, but this will count as a meeting. And so if you will scan that code on your phone, it takes you to a Google form, and you can fill out your name information, and we can use that for extra credit purposes. Also, any other faculty out there that want to use this as a extra credit opportunity, et cetera, I'm keeping track of or I have the ability to keep track of students outside of just the finance classes. And so I've done that. And so I just find me at Rawls and I can get you that form listing attendance. And so the resources we're going to specifically talk about today and hopefully give you some advice on are the EIDL application. We'll bring up the website and kind of give you some intro on how to fill that out. The PPP application form, which is posted, is available from your lender. We're going to look at a sample, but I think for the most part, it's the relevant application. And then we're going to use two guides that I think are pretty good just to show you some practical advice. One prepared by the U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business, and then one prepared by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. As a lawyer, I have to throw out my legal disclaimer there that, look, this is for educational purposes. This is not intended to be any type of specific advice, and it's a rapidly changing situation. And I really don't think we can emphasize too much about the rapid nature of it. I think we've touched on it a little bit, but Mike, can you tell us probably what's going on at banks today as this new guidance was released just last night?
Yes, I'm glad you called on me, and we have had some question and answer people pop up, and Dr. Mercer had just sent in a question and an answer and a comment related to the banks. And the one thing everyone needs to know, I've talked to many banks, and those of you who are applying know that the banks are currently covered up in the application process. You have to remember they didn't get this information on how to take these applications until last night. So the more you can have your application completely filled out, prepared, and submit to them, the better it is. But we're going to have to give them a little time to get these turned around. It's tough out there for the banks right now.
So we will continue on. And so we did want to start with some just immediate first steps that we think any small business owner should at least consider. And I think number one is we'll be talking about banking programs. So you should establish a local banking relationship if you don't have one already. And Mike or Stephen, if y'all want to just comment on really the importance of having a contact at a bank that can advise you on this process.
Certainly, as a banker, it was very important for me to know my customer and those customers that I already have a relationship with, and I generally know what their financial information is, their background, and that will streamline the process. We'll talk in a little bit about a hotline that's being created by a collection of folks that will help in this process, that you may bank with someone, you've never had a loan, and we'll get in touch with your bank and get you a banker to have a relationship with, but you can't substitute for a good relationship with your banker.
And same thing goes with your mortgage servicer. If you're facing, just a strapped for cash type situation and worried about being able to make that mortgage payment or rent payment, reaching out to your mortgage servicer or your landlord early on, starting the conversation early on, as difficult as it can be, it's that necessary first step. And a lot of times is all it takes to make that process go a lot smoother, a lot easier.
And second, once you once you establish bank contact, I think anybody should talk to that contact about these programs, getting this actually done, and other either internal or governmental programs. And by what internal I mean is things that your bank may do for you with a mortgage or another type of loan. Shawn, I know that Casey of First Bank has been a valuable resource, and I think many banks are doing what they're doing. And so if you just want to touch on briefly kind of what immediate assistance that they were able to give us.
Yeah, and so I called Casey at First Bank. He's our lender, and I called him probably 2 weeks ago when this thing started to kind of, get ramped up, and I started asking him options of lines of credit, how we can, if this thing drags on, I'm going to need some help, blah, blah, blah. Well, they immediately, and this is a smaller bank, and I've known them for about 3 or 4 years now, and he got with his boss, and they called me up and said, hey, we're going to defer your payments for 90 days at least, which was, I didn't ask for it. And so, that was a huge help. And then also to kind of, he's not an SBA lender, but these, these loans are not, it's going through the SBA, but just because they're not an SBA lender does not mean they can't, help you out on this. So just, you need to ask them if that they, they got the tools to actually, do these loans. And so, it's been an extreme help knowing, my banker and having that relationship. So if you don't already have one, you need to get one.
Yeah. And Stephen and Mike, is that kind of tracking what you're hearing that some banks, and I'm not speaking for all banks here, it's up to each individual bank what they want to do, but tracking with what you've heard some banks are doing as well?
Absolutely, Jared. Let me tell you, these banks want to help, and they have already been covered up by the fact that Stephen mentioned the deferral. Most of the banks are deferring without the customer asking for 90 days. So you want to go in and deal with your banks and find out what they're doing. But here again, they will get to this as fast as they possibly can. And they're at the front lines on this, and they have so much labor, but you are the person that they're interested in. And they're interested in the deferral. And many times we look at these programs, and that deferral is something that all these banks are offering, and the regulators have taken a softer approach back to the banks to allow the banks to do this.
And so the next resource that, in addition to your banker, at least locally in the Lubbock area, the Rawls College of Business, along with the Innovation Hub and the SBDC, have set up the Hub City Small Business Triage, which can help you with steps 3 and 4 on this slide. And Mike, I know you've been involved in that. Do you want to give us some brief insight on what that is there to do?
Sure. I think it was last Friday, actually, that the mayor met with us. It may have been the week before, but the participants were the Rawls College of Business. And then the people who have put this together, the SBDC is taking care of the triage hotline and the website, but those involved have been the city, the Rawls College of Business, the SBDC, the Innovation Hub, the Chamber of Commerce, and all the local banks and bankers. We met with them yesterday. We were a little premature on the hotline because the information on the PPP was not out, but we're going to be working with those people so that we can have the information necessary to help those who need help and to work with our institutions that are providing this valuable resource and the SBA.
So great local resource in Lubbock if you need help with any of this, and specifically 3 and 4. And so, Shawn, you've gone through the process, and I'm not going to list all these off one by one, but as far as number 3, I mean, if you don't have 18 months worth of financials, and that might be, I mean, that's just a general number that
Right.
it's a kind of a backward looking program, but how difficult was it for you to pull this information?
It was simple. Used our QuickBooks, and I use ADP for our payroll, so the reports are easy to pull. That's how I got my number of my average. And then on the revenues, I mean, these are all simple whole numbers that you can use off your tax return. If you filed for 2019, if you have it, you can, they're accepting and then, operating expenses. It's not asking for a whole lot of information. And, all the reports I printed off took me minutes. And so I've got everything in a package, and it took me less than half an hour to get it all done.
And so, and just to clarify, there may be additional information that your lender requires through the PPP, but as far as the application forms themselves, this lists all of the potential numbers. Now, it's up to each individual lender to decide on what level of documentation they may or may not need through the PPP, but these were the only numbers on the application. And then fourth, I just, go ahead, Mike.
Let's go back to that, because you asked me earlier about the importance of the relationship of your banker. If you currently have a relationship and the banker has your other information, then everything that Shawn just mentioned is all you're probably going to have, because the bank has the other information. It's going to be those that don't have that that's going to have to build financials. But many people, that's all they're going to have is what Shawn mentioned.
Yeah.
And then fourth, kind of from a legal perspective, just you're going to need your business records handy. And so things like your EIN, which I know is sometimes hard to find because it's easily lost, your entity documents, some ownership structure percentages, which is a little more detailed than we'll go in, your relevant dates, and then also some payroll verification documents will be needed in the application process as well. But we just put this slide up to encourage you that you can move forward quickly on this with some limited resources, or if you start now, I mean, building out these and utilizing resources such as the small business triage, the sooner you get started, the better. So this is a comparison chart of the two specific programs that we're going to discuss, the EIDL and the PPP. I'm going to switch my screen share, because I think that's a little bit small, over to my Adobe Acrobat, so you can see this document a little bit larger. I think that was the wrong one pulled up, but there we go. Is that coming up okay, other panelists on your end?
Yeah.
And so this is not, I would say, the most detailed chart, but I think it's a good summary reference of these two programs and some of the differences. On our slides for today, I've highlighted a small tweak to the interest rate and the maturity under the PPP. Again, this is constantly evolving.
Can you zoom in a little bit here?
What's that?
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Sure. How about I just go over here, because I don't want to spend too long on this. But just to emphasize the point that Mike made earlier, the EIDL, it's a loan program directly through the SBA. You can apply on their website. The PPP is through local participating banks. And Mike or Stephen, I'll turn it over to you if you want to give some broad kind of overviews of the two programs and maybe the differences between the two, because we'll look at each individually going forward.
Sure. Let me just make a comment that we have changed it on your slide, but the one that we're seeing, if you look under the Payroll Protection Program, it shows up to 10 years. That has been changed by the Treasury to 2 years.
And technically the slide is correct. It says up to, but they've specifically said and decided on 2, correct?
That is correct. They have decided on 2. And where it says not to exceed 4%, that actually went from 4% to half of 1%. And last night it has been changed. It appears that it will come in at 1%. So those are two changes, but in a nutshell, you basically get your gross revenue under the PPP, and that number, whatever the average monthly amount is, multiply it times 2.5, and that is the amount that you're entitled to.
And so both of these programs are somewhat similar in structure in that they're a loan, either through SBA or the bank, and then there's some element of a forgiveness program. Mike, do you just want to, or Stephen, do you want to touch on briefly kind of the difference and how this is different than, like, say, a traditional bank loan and that concept of forgiveness?
Stephen, you want me to take that?
Sure.
Basically, these are, the PPP is 100% guaranteed loan by the SBA. And as I mentioned earlier, you qualify for an amount. The forgiveness comes at 6 months, and it consists of your payroll cost, mortgage interest payments, rent payments, and utility payments, the sum of those numbers. Now, it can be decreased if your payroll decreased. So there are factors. I won't go into that calculation, but you have to, when you apply, put the number of individuals that are on your payroll that you qualify for, and in the 6 months on the forgiveness period, then you have to prove that up. Any excess will remain on the books as 100% guaranteed by the bank and will be paid out for the remaining 18 months that you have.
Outstanding. And also, in addition to the loan programs, and Shawn, you've seen this firsthand, that there is a emergency grant available under the EIDL directly with the SBA. And so is the application any different for that grant, or how did that work?
No, and so as we applied for that loan, at the very end of that application, it just basically asked, are you interested in the $10,000 grant? Which we selected yes, and then they take down what bank you're with, the bank account number and the routing number. So that's currently being processed at the moment. Don't really know how long it's going to take to be processed. I've read up to a couple weeks. But yeah, and so that is cash that they are just, if you qualify, which, you know, the qualifications weren't much on it, they will, I just imagine it will just be auto deposited into my account. And then, yeah, that's how that went. So,
and we fully acknowledge, look, there are no experts on these loan programs. They're so new and so rapidly changing. And we fully acknowledge there's a lot of detail that some other resources will go into. We're not going to go into today about qualifications, loan forgiveness, et cetera. And to some extent, a lot of those are unknown. I was on a webinar yesterday with some venture capital law firms out of California, and they had a congressman on, and there were questions that everybody, I mean, these were lawyers who were on the front lines of implementing this for some of their startup clients in California. And there were just a lot of unknowns. And don't let that be a frustration or a holdup, this idea that there's so much media buzz about unknowns and changing regulations. I think back to that first mover advantage, proceed ahead the best you can to get these applications done and submitted. Anybody want to?
Thinking about these at kind of high level, these are loans that are provided in, you know, disaster emergency situations at generous terms to get money flowing, help with liquidity, get people back on their feet. Not to say that we're, you know, failing to underwrite fundamentals or just setting cash, you know, out any which way out the door, but this is designed to help people out, and the government recognizes that we're facing a unprecedented amount of payroll losses here. I mean, from the numbers that came out this morning, and just hearing the economic commentary through, you know, various interviews, things look bad, and people, you know, recognize they're going to get worse. And so, taking advantage of these funds, it's really a necessary step to help get our economy, you know, back on track where it needs to be.
I think
Absolutely.
I mean, as I read in the Wall Street Journal, I guess it was yesterday, that they're calling this the small business gold rush. So this is a limited amount of funds, but, you know, I mean, at least for me, I haven't laid any employees off. I've cut some hours down, but, you know, this is an opportunity for me where, I mean, it's going to float the company on a payroll perspective for 2.5 months, and that's hopefully this thing will be worked through by then. But I mean, I'll be able to increase hours. I'll keep all my employees, and this is going to be an opportunity to make sure these guys are making rent. You know, they can pay their bills, they can buy groceries. It is a huge help. And then I've even talked to some other owners too that they have had to lay people off, and if they qualify for this and get funds, they're going to immediately rehire those people back and work them full time. So it's a great program.
Yeah, and so the first one we want to take a little bit of a closer look at is the PPP program, and there are tons of informational materials out there. I saw this one from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I thought it was a pretty good guide, a quick overview, pretty easily understandable. Again, not a whole lot of detail, but it's a decent walkthrough. And so if you want this, there's the web link on the presentation there, or I've got another QR code here. You can scan it. It'll take you to the website online where you can download the PDF. And so what I'll do is I will share that actual document itself, and we can just take a really, really quick run view or run through of that kind of Q&A that they set out in that document. So let me see, is that coming up okay? Let me switch over here. And so, you know, it answers questions like, am I eligible? And for the most part, for the PPP, most small businesses are eligible. Mike or Stephen, I mean, I don't, not to put you on the spot, but anything you want to touch on, you know, eligibility or even what lenders are looking for under the PPP program?
I think as much as anything, it's pretty self-descriptive here. You have to have under 500 employees. You can have multiple businesses, provided you remain under that 500 employee threshold. But just meet the qualifications. They're pretty self-explanatory.
Yes, and also on what lenders will not look for, that personal guarantees and collateral are not required, which can be, you know, for borrowers very, very enticing. So Mike or Stephen, anything on that? No? Okay. Well, good. Also, I would point out from a legal perspective that the standard that you're filling out these documents is a good faith certification. And so this does not require certified financials from a CPA. It does not require, you know, an affidavit under oath. You still have to absolutely tell the truth, but this little bit lower standard allows you to move forward based on some information, such as Shawn being able to pull his ADP employment reports, not having to have audited financials that show that. And Shawn, I just didn't know what you want, again, kind of reiterate, or if you want to reiterate the
I'm a good
you went through.
I got my reports off ADP, and then my financials off my QuickBooks, and I submitted those. You know, it's all I mean, it's all accurate, but yeah, I mean, it is kind of crazy to be able to, you know, I'm applying for a large loan, and all I'm doing is I'm giving you documents, and yeah, they're correct. So hopefully these won't get taken advantage of, but it is it's a lot simpler.
Is my Excel sheet showing up for you guys?
Yeah, I see it.
And so this is something that was just released by a couple of lenders last night. And it's an Excel worksheet that allows you under the PPP, which that loan is processed by your local bank. It allows you to estimate your loan amount, which is primarily what borrowers are concerned about right now, is right, how much can I borrow? Section 2 goes into this concept of forgiveness, and expenses are a part of that. And then Section 3 is also geared towards forgiveness too, about maintaining staff levels. I don't have this available on the web, but I think I will definitely get it over to some folks at the Rawls Small Business Triage, and I think most lenders are going to have this available. Mike, didn't know if you wanted to add anything on if you've seen this Excel spreadsheet before, or kind of how borrowers or lenders should look at it.
Yes, this is related to forgiveness, and we did have a question that I did want to address. It says, is there a 25% criteria for the PPP loan? And basically, if you look at the forgiveness standards, and it's on this document, it basically is saying the forgiveness should be 75% direct payroll and then 25% on the other. It doesn't say you can't have over 25%, but it appears there's going to be, you're going to have to document why it's above that 25%.
Okay, so and I just want to show this tool as a hopefully a encouragement to small business owners that it is not a unbearable calculation and process to go through. I think, you know, with the proper planning and preparation, you can get this done. And so we'll make this and try and make this available through some outlet. So I'll switch back, and I apologize for my clunky navigation of these slides. Is what's coming up now? What am I sharing?
A blank
screen, Jared.
Okay, good. Well, I'm not doing that. So I think I need to get out of my keynote here and let me get back, and so I can share our presentation again. There we go. So that's the small business worksheet prepared by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Has a pretty good FAQ and kind of guide, and then look for that worksheet. And most importantly, on the PPP program, it's through your local lender, and the process starts and originates with them. Also, here's the actual application. So this is the 2-page document that Shawn was talking about earlier. This is marked as a sample. I think that this has been approved in a final form by the SBA, and lenders should be circulating the final form of this. Let me get my share, and I'll share.
There's actually a newer one, but yeah, it's very similar to the one you just put up there.
Yeah, and so it's changing, and I know there's minor tweaks, but Shawn, I didn't know if you just wanted to kind of touch on, no question specifically, but kind of about how long and, you know, how we went
through this
submitted.
You know, this form took me about 15-20 minutes to do. I talked to my lender because I've been reading different deals about you take your average monthly from 2019, but he said if you want a more accurate representation, you can go from March 31st backwards 12 months. So we got our average, and that include all the taxes that you pay, even the employee taxes that they pay, and the employer payroll taxes that you pay. And that just gives you you know, if you divide that total number by 12, that's going to give you your average monthly. Simple math, multiply by 2.5, and that gives you your loan amount. There have been some questions of, well, since you can pay portions of your mortgage interest, you know, with this, can you take into consideration how much you paid in 12 months of mortgage interest and, you know, divide that by 25%? From everything I've read, you cannot do this. The loan amount they want to give you is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. You can't include sick time, vacation time that you paid out. I think health insurance premiums that you paid for, you know, employees, you can incorporate into that, but it needs to be expenses associated with your payroll. I did notice a question on the Q&A talking about K-1s and cash distributions being paid out. That's a gray area that you're going to want to talk to your lender about. We have a situation at our company too where we have guaranteed payments, but that's in our partnership agreement, and it is a consistent payment. So we did include that in ours. We're not giving legal advice or any sort of advice, but that is something I've included, and I'm going to run it through my banker just to double check all this stuff. So, you know, like we said, I've been going through even this document that was released at midnight last night. I went through the fine print to make sure all the bullet points and all the qualifications and what you can put in that calculation hadn't changed, and the majority of it stayed the same. So it is payroll associated fees and expenses, And on the guaranteed payments, it's in a contract written out in our partnership agreement. So we've included that. I've actually printed off a copy of that to give to my lender, and we're going to have to get advised on that. So,
Jared, I want to mention too that on the PP&P, the bankers, many of the banks, not all of them, will have an online solution where you can go to their web page and go to their online link, and the application information will be there. So be looking for that as well.
And also, I'll point out that I've seen a couple questions. I haven't been monitoring them as closely, but surrounding K-1s, even 1099s, and how that's treated for payroll purposes, distributions, et cetera. And as Shawn mentioned, that's a gray area. That was brought up on that call I was on with that venture capital firm yesterday. The question was asked, and none of the lawyers volunteered up an answer, and even the congressman said he wasn't sure on the intent of that. And so consult with your experts, but there are tons of those questions about PPP. And I don't mean to shortcut the process, but we're about 45 minutes in here. So let's shift gears to the EIDL. And the one resource I saw that was pretty good on EIDL from a small business perspective, kind of cutting to the essential elements, was this guide prepared by the U.S. Senate Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship. And so it's a little bit longer document, but there's specific EIDL guidance on pages 7 to 8. There's some guidance on the PPP here too, but the EIDL is on pages 7 to 8. So I'm going to switch over to that document very briefly. If anybody wants to, Shawn or Mike or Stephen, if y'all want to jump in on the EIDL while I get this set up.
Yeah, I filled out this document 2 nights ago, and it was simple. Just a couple numbers on here. I finished it. I got a confirmation number, but that's all I got. I got a confirmation number. I didn't get a confirmation email. So this is more or less you fill out and you sit and wait, I guess. So it was it took me about 10 minutes to do, and then I was done with it, and I got a confirmation number, and then that was it. So.
And obviously the from Shawn's comments about filling out both, you can apply to both loan programs. You cannot use the funds for the same purposes. Obviously, PPP is intended for payroll. The EIDL is more for ongoing business operations, but you can apply for both. And so just to point out, a lot of the issues are the same between the two. They're in the same act, but there are subtle differences. So this is a good source document to start with. Mike or Stephen, anything to add on the EIDL kind of background or eligibility, et cetera?
I think Shawn has told us how easy it is, and certainly has firsthand experience.
Outstanding. Well, if it's okay with you guys, what I'll do is I will just shift over to the online application just so you see it. I've got the website listed on the slides and a QR code as well. But if you go to that website, this is what comes up. This is the application process. From just interfacing with the IRS some and some governmental agencies, anytime you see just a few steps up here on the timeline, that's usually a good thing. I will only be able to get us to the second page. We won't be able to get through the whole process because I'm not going to actually fill out the application. However, I can click to get to at least the second page that I'm a business with not more than 500 employees. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I would think that most businesses won't have an issue clicking those, but do read them. For time purposes, I'm just not. And so then it launches the actual application itself. Some basic legal information. That's why I recommend you have your organizational documents ready. It specifically asks for gross revenues for the prior 12-month period, cost of goods sold. From a real estate perspective, it talks about rental properties and lost rents. However, it's a little I've heard some in the real estate community saying, look, I didn't have lost rents until yesterday, April 1st, when rents were due. But I have heard also that they're going to add some additional real estate provisions to the PPP and make it more friendly to those owners, investors in real estate. But that's, potential changes to come. Stephen, at this point, I kind of took a real estate detour. Didn't know if you wanted to add anything on either of these programs from a real estate perspective.
Sure, absolutely. If you do have an agency multifamily mortgage, there are relief programs or procedures put in place now to help those property owners get through this crisis, so that you can use these EIDL proceeds or PPP proceeds for truly payroll expenses and not covering necessarily maybe lost rents. There are some mortgage relief programs in place for multifamily, just multifamily or apartment complex owners, but I just wanted to point that out.
Absolutely. So this is the application we're looking at is the online application for the EIDL, which is directly through the SBA and their website. And Shawn, now that I've scrolled down to the bottom, anything else from your...
Yeah, on the next page, it's going to have you basically owner information is what goes in there. Additional information, I can't even remember what I put into that section, but I think I was just answering a couple questions. And then
I think that was where it was also asking about ownership percentages, because that determines who is potentially guarantees the loan.
Yes, and that was it. I think the estimate time for this, they say on the first page, like 2 hours or something. This literally took me 20 minutes to do.
And so far there were no documents submitted in connection with this, right? No uploads. It was just, you did this, these additional information. You got a summary and a confirmation.
If you go up a little bit, you'll see where you have to input a couple of numbers here. So if you look here, combined annual operating expense for 12 months, that's not required. It's not red. I knew the number. So actually it wasn't that one. It was,
that one's not required. It's not red.
Yeah. And so the only two numbers I put in were the red ones above it. Gross revenue for 12 months. If you go up, Jared, a little bit.
Yep.
And the cost of goods sold for 12 months. Those are the two numbers I provided. I got those off my QuickBooks in a matter of minutes. And then that was all the bookkeeping I had to do on that one.
Yeah. And so kind of back to that good faith standard, they're not requiring, document upload. There may be, they may, in order to process a loan, we really don't know. Going forward, though, they may require, but it doesn't look like they're doing that at the time. So let me switch back to our PowerPoint presentation, or our keynote presentation. And sorry, there we go, screen share. So just kind of wrapping up, what we've shown you so far is we've given you a brief overview, and then we went into the two specific applications. This was the online application that we looked at. Also, I wanted to mention there are tons of additional resources out there and being published by the minute. Here were two pretty good ones that are a little bit more in depth than the two we've discussed. They're both by law firms, so they're not exactly the most entertaining reading. But Thompson & Knight has a good one on the CARES Act highlights, and they go through both programs in a little bit more detailed perspective. And then Lowenstein Sandler, a law firm out of California, has a bunch of good resources on their website, but in particular, this PPP program was good. And so with that, we're kind of almost at the end. We've got about 5 minutes left in our hour. I'll kind of turn it over to the panelists to give any concluding thoughts or anything we missed. I'm happy to go back in the presentation if you want, and then we'll wind up with some additional resources.
Jared, for me to wrap up, I just want everyone to know that the number on the business triage will be actually answered by the Rawls College of Business graduate students, and others who will be helping are Rawls College of Business faculty who have the expertise in the areas that you need. So in addition to the Small Business Development Corporation, that number being on their website The actual work will be done by students and faculty from the Rawls College of Business, working in conjunction with our local banks to provide them this resource.
So just one question came out a few minutes ago about whether or not you can use both EIDL loan and a PPP loan. As I understand it, you can, but maybe the best route to go, assuming you're using the EIDL loan for COVID-19 related reasons, would be to apply for the $10,000 grant and then roll that into your PPP loan, but not to, perhaps not to use the EIDL loan truly for payroll purposes, as that's what that Paycheck Protection Program is intended to do. And as I read the terms, I think that's pretty fair advice, given the terms of the PPP loans are rather generous and probably most appropriately used for, well, as the title intends, payroll.
And the EIDL loan is not available for loan forgiveness as well. So that loan will need to be paid back in full, whereas the PPP, using it for greater than 75% payroll, you have the opportunity to get it forgiven. I noticed a question on here about the criteria. So you have to, and how I interpret it, you have your average monthly payroll expense. So you have to use that PPP loan, 75% of those funds, which you have to prove out through your payroll reports after you get the loan or the loan was originated, 75% or greater of those needs to be used towards your average monthly payroll that you already established. And then you have to put down the number of employees you have on there. Like I put the number of 13, which I imagine I will have to prove up at the end of the, or until it's time to submit for loan forgiveness, I will have to prove up that I maintain that number of employees. Where there is some gray area is, I mean, if I have to terminate an employee for cause, how does that work? Is there a time frame I have to rehire somebody so I'm back to that, original number of employees? Those are questions where I feel like hopefully within a week or two or 3 or a month, there'll be more guidelines from the SBA on that, because as of right now, it's pretty cut and dry. You have to maintain the same number of employees that you had when you applied for the loan. But as a business owner, if there's any small business owners in here, you understand that your payroll is very dynamic. It's not static as far as guys quitting, needing to terminate employees immediately for cause if something comes up. But then the other 25%, so if you use 75% for payroll, you can use the other 25% for your utilities, for your rents, for mortgage interest, not principal, mortgage interest as well. So.
Outstanding. Thanks, Shawn. And so with that, unless anybody else has anything, give me a head shake, yes or no, other panelists. If
Jared, we have one more question asking to spend a minute on what happens if a business does both. Let me do that real quick. The EIDL, the maximum is $2 million. The PP&P, the combined, you can go up to $10 million as a combination of both, and then you net out the grant of $10,000. So basically you can have $10,010 if you, 10 million plus the $10,000. So
outstanding. Yeah, a lot of resources financially between the two programs. So thank you, panelists, for jumping in. I mean, we put this together on 48 hours notice, so thank you. And I kind of wanted to part with something that Mike and I discussed earlier this morning, was that, all of these unknowns, and not only in this context and administering these programs, but unknowns everywhere, right? In that, there's some pretty good opportunities. And I don't mean to diminish the health situation or the economic situation, but I do think the people that can dig in, and this is an example, and students, learn the program, understand, be able to converse in it, and small business owners take advantage of the resources. And hopefully we will, this will be a catalyst that starts a very quick turnaround for us all. So thanks for your time. We will get this distributed on the appropriate channels as a recording, and we will hopefully have more of these going forward. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you.